For the first time, I believe, since the Civil Rights Movement, has the experience of Black people in America been at the forefront of our news cycles and across our commerce. People around the world are actively participating in the conversation about disparity amongst Black people. This includes in the career space, which is a beast of its own. For the best tips and advice for all things career, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video every month. According to a study by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, about 58% of Black people have indicated that they have felt racism on their jobs, me included. We represent less than 1% of Fortune 500 CEOs, and we make up only 3.2% of executives and senior level management employees. I have both witnessed and felt the brunt of all these statistics that I just named. By watching this video, you'll get some insight into my personal experience as a Black woman in corporate America, as well as some tips of how to triumph and not be a victim as a Black person in corporate. So let's start with the instances where I have experienced racism. The first one is when I worked for a small company in healthcare manufacturing industry. It was a small office, a local office, but there were a lot of people that worked remotely in sales and different managers all across the world in different countries. And there was always an unspoken us versus them, because all of the people that worked at the local office were Black and brown people. And we had a different experience. We didn't travel internationally with all these great perks and things that they had, but you could just tell there was a difference in class, there's a difference in background. But again, it was unspoken until this one particular lunch that I had with one of the international managers who just happened to be in town. And before we could sit down and really break bread, the first thing she asked me was, "So how do you like working in the ghetto?" Excuse me? The ghetto? Why does it have to be the ghetto? Oh, because this is the office where all the Black and brown people work. So that unspoken energy that we felt, she verbalized it to us, and it made it very clear that these were the conversations that the remote employees and the managers were having about the people in the local office, because she had no shame in saying it and had no problem with it. We already didn't get the same perks and the same days off as those that worked internationally and remotely. But that just gave me the realization of, this is what you think of me, because we work hard, we're still people, and we support their efforts, but I have to be working in the ghetto. It was too rude for me. And that, along with some other mechanisms of how the office and the company was structured, let me know that I would have a hard time growing here, but especially if you look at me as working in the ghetto. So I subsequently left that place shortly after that. In another instance, I was working for a very large, very well-known telecommunications company. I supported all of the grassroots efforts, their guerrilla marketing events where we would go and set up and really be a face of the organization at events, at different festivals, etc. that would be happening locally. My colleagues and I, we were a small team, and I was the only African-American person, Black person, that was on that team. And they let us know that too. When you're a contractor, and you know, if you've experienced being a contractor at a company as opposed to a full-time employee, there's a difference. It may be slight and subtle, but there's a difference in how they treat people. And it's one of the largest telecommunications company that exists. So they could have hired us full-time, but they were cheap in that way, cheap labor. What can I say? So I remember once while I was at an event, I had split my finger open, gross, ooh, I know. And I had to leave the event to go to the hospital so they could sew it back up. It was what it was. But, I handled the situation, spoke to the second point of contact person so that we met our contractual agreements, and then everything ended up being fine. So I think I was only off for half a day after getting it sewed up, dealing with all that fun stuff. And I went to go see the vice president that was over our team, just so I can let her see my face, let her know, hey, this is what happened, but I'm ready to get back in there and support the team. And she basically belittled me. She made it seem like I was being lazy or that I was exaggerating my injuries, even though I had a doctor's note and a whole statement, because I had to give it to them for working purposes, letting them know I had split my finger open. Hello. And then she proceeded to talk about her teenage son who had a similar injury, even though it really wasn't similar, and how he was more productive than I was. And I'm like, where is this coming from? It was completely unnecessary, especially because I took the initiative to come see you and let you know what was going on, but I'm here to help. But her demeanor toward me was unnecessarily demeaning. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I am just a contractor. I know how you treat some contractors, but when we would be in meetings, I would see how she would speak to other members of my team. I was the only Black person on the team. I would see how she would interact with them. And she was more lighthearted. She was more accepting. Even in passing in the hallways, there would be times when she would walk past and blatantly ignore me, but she wouldn't do that to them. So to me, and we hadn't had any other beef outside of that, but I just noticed that there was a difference to me, the Black girl. So there was a person that left and a new person that ended up being hired, who was the daughter of another VP somewhere, had just graduated out of college, and she really had no interest in working. There would be times when we couldn't find her. She would be out chilling somewhere or on her phone or not really putting in any effort. It wasn't something to build her career upon, for sure. And she had no experience. I had more experience than her at the job and just in the workforce in general. But sure enough, shortly after she arrived, I got a call from the staffing agency letting me know that my services were no longer needed and that this colleague would be taking over my events. Even though I had been there longer than her, I knew the process. I had built relationships there, and honestly, she really wasn't that interested in working, but she got to stay, and I had to pack up my things, being laid off or whatever in this space. But I wasn't the only colleague who she could have switched out with, but I was the only Black one. And it was just very apparent in just how I was treated. And I pay attention to these things. They may be subtle, but I pay attention and I read people's energy, and I know when I no longer want it. And that's what occurred in that situation. I've also experienced sexism. I worked for an advertising agency with well-known clients, very large companies as clients, and they had been in the business for a while themselves. And 90% of my team were women. Making an upward movement, though, as a woman was a challenge and darn near impossible. Any woman who had been there for a while, so who was both qualified and interested in growth within the team and the next level of promotion, it was very linear. So it was expected that this would be the next level for people. Had to go through this rigorous, basically master's level course with pleas and presentations just to go to the next step. To be recognized even for all their work and what they've proven that they could do in the role. So sure, it's easy to think, okay, well, that's just the process. Again, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And that's what I thought, that this was just the process. That's until a new male employee, white male, and joined the team. And by the time he came, I had been with the company for about 6 good months. And it was a highly technical job. So in order for you to direct people or to train anybody under you or speak to other people, you had to be in the job for a while to know the ins and outs and be trained on it. You had to, even when you started, you had to be trained for a good while before you were on the floor by yourself. So it was odd to me that he had come in as a supervisor, because it didn't happen. It didn't happen on that team, in that department at all. You didn't just come in as a supervisor because you don't know what you're doing. You can't direct anybody. And even if you had similar experience in account management, the way this company did things was different. So everybody else that had a supervisory role in that department had been there for a while and had to work their way up. So 6 months after he joined the team as a supervisor, he was promoted again. And again, that was odd because nobody moved that fast. But again, this is the department of 90% women, and he just moving on up the ladder, okay, like the Jeffersons. I'll tell you that he never worked late. He didn't know all of the systems, so he was asking other people for help, which is fine. But how are you gonna be a supervisor and then a super supervisor when you don't even know what you're doing? And at the time, I had a master's degree at that time, and he didn't. At that point, I would be there 1 to 2 hours late, 3 or 4 times a week. But and I did inquire after being there for about 2 years. I did inquire about the next level, getting to the next step, and being promoted. And then I was told about all these hoops that I had to jump through in order to even be considered and to apply from that. And I'm like, okay, I see what y'all on. I'm watching it. So y'all, the rest of y'all can cover your eyes and act like this ain't happening, but I see it, and it's injustice to me. So then I got the scoop from one of my coworkers who had been there longer than me that let me know that he had actually interviewed for a position at my level, but the interviewers were like, oh, you should be a supervisor. What? So they just gave it to him. And then they decided to promote him to the senior version of that supervisor within 6 months. He didn't have to write no presentations. He didn't even have to stay late. But he was one of maybe 3 white men on the team, and they just didn't have to do the things that the women had to do in order to be promoted. So that kindly let me know that my growth was not a priority, that my credentials didn't mean anything, and that my gifts and talents would not be used. So I decided to leave this place, and I reported the incident to HR, which was in a different location, so they didn't have buddies and friends that were at this specific location locally. But I reported it because it just wasn't right, and I wasn't gonna stand for that, and I'm sorry. I have a goal, I have a life to support, I have a purpose to live, and I can't let y'all just be geeking me around like that was crazy. But yeah, ultimately I decided to leave. All right, so I know that I am not the only one who's had these kinds of experiences. So make sure you comment below with your experiences of racism and sexism that you have experienced in the workplace. Let's talk about it. Now I want to move into something different, which is working in a place where I am accepted. Y'all know I got to end on a positive note. It can't be all gloom and doom and complaining, but there are good things that come after the hard things that we go through. So my latest career move is one that really feels like an anomaly. And it's one of those diamonds of the rough places where the culture is conducive to growth, fairness, and equality for everyone that works there, starting from the top down, which I appreciate. And I know that my race doesn't play a role in my growth and how I do my work every day. I've noticed there are Black men and Black women that are in leadership positions, as well as Hispanic, Asian, and Middle Eastern people at all levels who can be themselves, bring their expertise, and not jump through hoops or be treated differently because of the color of their skin. In the wake of recent killings of Black people by the police, and when I say recent, I mean publicized recently, because let's be honest, it's been happening since Black people have been here since the 1600s. This is not new, unfortunately. But the CEO of the company that I work for has had panel discussions and to encourage the dialogue of Black people, Black voices to speak up and provide education to our non-white colleagues from their perspective. But they created a space where everyone can be a part of it. So we banished that us versus them mentality, but it really showed that we're all in this together, even though we might be in different boats, but we're going the same direction. And that's something that I appreciate. I feel heard, and I feel like I can be myself and not have to mute myself and turn down my Blackness, but just let my gifts and talents and hard work shine. And after the things that I've experienced, it's extremely refreshing. If you have natural hair and have some hesitations about having a successful interview with your natural hair do, make sure you check out my video, Should I Be Concerned About Interviewing with Natural Hair, to find out if you should adjust your do before you start interviewing. You can find the link below in the description. So what can we do? Are we doomed? Should we just accept this? Should we move from our current country to find something better? What should we do? I'll tell you to be honest about how important diversity and equality in the workplace is to you. For some people, it's not. Some people can keep their head down and be like, I'm not paying attention to what they're saying, what they're doing. Then that's fine. But if you're a person where the scenarios that I have mentioned or in your experiences similarly have really stayed with you, where you can't just put it out of your mind and go back to normal before this instance, then think about it. Be honest and start to put that in your job search strategy to look for and to confirm that this company displays diversity and inclusion. Another thing that you should do is, no matter what, always walk with integrity and speak with integrity, no matter what other people are doing, no matter whose ignorance you encounter or silly remarks and things. You always walk with integrity. You are still a brand, and if you are a Christian person, you represent God, and ultimately He is your source. Ultimately, He is guiding your life. So you don't stoop down to the level of idiots, really, to make your point. You step higher. And every time you step higher, the rest of your path will go higher with you. Make sure you research the company culture through social media. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Is this the kind of culture that I want to be a part of? Is this helpful for me, conducive to my lifestyle and my thoughts and values? But go on social media, see who is in the room when they're taking pictures of company outings and large meetings. Are they diverse? What kind of energy are you getting from them? Because you can get this kind of energy from pictures. So be mindful of that. If you suspect racism, sexism, or any injustices in your company, report it to HR, no matter what. Do your due diligence. And of course, if you see on the other end that they're not doing anything about it, well, then you have a choice, whether you want to take it to the next level or go to a company that would do something about racism and sexism happening in the workplace. And then, just like I said before, do your research, be mindful, don't jump into something blindly, but check yourself as well. Don't cry wolf if that's not something that's happening for real in the workplace. Pray about it. Ask other people that you trust if they've experienced injustice in the workplace. And if so, like I said, don't be afraid to speak up. You matter, your voice matters, your experience matters, and you shouldn't feel intimidated or worthless or less than in the workplace. Now that you have had a peek into my life and my perspective as a Black woman in corporate America, as well as some tips of how you should be able to move forward as an upstanding employee at your workplace, definitely put these things into practice. But however, do you know what it takes to actually be successful? Check out my blog post. Being successful involves an evolution of you to make sure that no matter what step you take and no matter what environment that you're in, that you are successful. You can find the link below in the description. Also, continue the conversation by joining my Facebook group, From Stagnant Job to Ideal Career. Also, I've posted a link here to sign the petition for the Crown Act, which will stop states from discriminating against Black people for their hairstyle. So check that out, as that's important as well. Lastly, if you like this video, let me know by commenting on it. I love your comments. Make sure you like it, share it, subscribe to my channel, and invite your friends to join the conversation if they've experienced similar things, or if they're just trying to make the best career transition to find a career on purpose. See you next month.